talking to you about functional foods for healthy aging. And I'm just going to talk to you about it in the context of some research that I've been involved in at University of Guelph, and then a toolkit that we kind of culminated out of this research. But just as an outline to my presentation, I'm going to first give some background with respect to rationalizing all this activity, and then I'll talk about the research project itself with respect to its purpose, what we did, and some kind of overall summary results of what we found. And then I'll transition into the toolkit that we developed as a dissemination strategy. And the whole idea of dissemination and reaching out to stakeholders is really what today's event is about and what Agri-food for healthy aging is about. And so the toolkit was very consistent with these ideas. So this whole idea of connecting food with our health has always been there, but it's really evolved in the field of nutrition. So traditionally, the way we had kind of connected food with health is with respect to the micronutrients in food and how they might influence getting enough. So that's in terms of preventing scurvy or preventing vitamin B12 deficiency, like we heard in the presentation. So really focusing on making sure we get enough so we don't get any diseases that are a result of deficiencies of those nutrients. And what's happened as time has progressed and all those, first of all those deficiency diseases were discovered and people got Nobel Prizes and all this exciting stuff happened. And we got really, really privileged in our society in terms of nutrition and availability of food, with a few exceptions in terms of nutrients. But really, we're very lucky. And so what's evolved is we're now connecting food to our health kind of more in chronic disease. And this is also good job security for people in nutrition because we can consider a whole bunch of other things in relation to food and the constituents of food beyond those basic nutrient functions. And a key example that has manifested this is functional foods. So this idea of functional foods really extends how we relate food and the constituents of food to our health. And it has had a major influence on research activity in food, nutrition, and health. In terms of what are functional foods, so the simplest definition is that they're foods that provide health benefits beyond basic nutrition. So it's something extra beyond that basic nutritional function. They're in a conventional food form, and they have some special component that could be termed a bioactive that's either enhanced in the food, and that could happen through an agricultural practice like a spearmint plant from the University of Guelph that has a high rosmarinic acid, or it could happen through just being added to the food. And this bioactive constituent has some kind of biological rationale that relates to health. So then a food becomes a functional food. Health Canada has a working definition for a functional food on its website that's listed there. A functional food is similar in appearance to or maybe a conventional food that is consumed as part of a usual diet and is demonstrated to have physiological benefits or reduce the risk of chronic disease beyond basic nutritional function, i.e. they contain a bioactive compound. In terms of thinking about functional foods, there's lots to learn and lots to work on. Specifically, older adults really emerge as a key potential beneficiary of functional foods. There's a whole bunch of health areas that functional foods have the potential to influence that are highly relevant to older adults. And there's lots of other factors with respect to aging and nutrition that functional foods can address. There's actually a great review article that came out of Can Talks, which is just on the 401 in Mississauga. I actually worked there for a little while after my PhD, but I didn't write this amazing article. And it's called The Changing Face of Food and Nutrition in Canada and the US, Opportunities and Challenges for Older Adults. And this article really articulates that among all the different life stage groups, older adults are really one of the key beneficiaries of functional foods. Looking at some other rationale to focus on older adults where functional foods are concerned, there's also an article that came out of University of Guelph from the department that studies agricultural economics. Now, people who are economists do a lot of really sophisticated analyses, which makes their articles really hard to read. So what I pulled out of this article, not knowing how to understand all the econometrics, is that there's two key things that they found in their analysis looking at Canadians' demand for food products in support of health. They identified a disease threat and an age increase as two key drivers. I mentioned before last week that my husband's an agricultural economist, and half the time I have no idea what he's doing. So when I was reading this article, I wasn't surprised I didn't really understand it. And then a final note that really relates a rationale for focusing functional foods on older adults is the 2010 report on the state of public health in Canada. And the Canadian public health officer at the time, Dr. David Butler-Jones, focused the report on aging. And there was a whole bunch of statistics in there about the aging population. Well, obviously we're all aging, but the proportion of adults over 65 is rapidly increasing, and it's going to be a quarter of the population by 2050. Life expectancy is also increasing, as are the existence of chronic health conditions. And importantly, relating to lifestyle management like nutrition, 37% of those are taking steps to improve their health, and that can really include dietary management, like functional food inclusion in your diet. So all of these ideas about aging population, older adults, benefiting functional foods, and functional foods led us to this research project that we did at University of Guelph. And it was called, we tried to come up with a short title, but this is all we could do, so I just say it really fast, exploring the consumption, awareness, understanding, and motivating factors related to functional foods in older adults. And it was a study that we did at Guelph that was funded by the Canadian Foundation for Dietetic Research. So Dietitians of Canada, they have a research arm, it's called CFDR, and they fund research. And they actually put out a special call for functional food research. And so I put in a proposal for it, and it was actually funded. I was totally surprised because I'm used to being rejected. So we were really excited to receive this project, and Judy Shishka, who is a prof at University of Guelph, she actually just moved to Australia, was involved with it, as were many graduate and undergraduate students. And the project was approved by University of Guelph Research Ethics Board. So what we looked at in this project was, it was really, a big part of the project was a questionnaire. And I'm mentioning it at the end, but I'll mention it now too, that Jenna Campbell, who is here today, and I'm so excited to see her, she actually developed the questionnaire. So we worked for quite a long time to develop this questionnaire. And this questionnaire really worked to address the research purpose and the specific objectives. So overall, we were looking to understand functional foods and health and disease among older adults. And what we wanted to know about that were different factors that promote consumption, different factors that discourage consumption, actual just consumption and purchase patterns, as well as relationship to health, sources of information. And then these three things were key frameworks that we focused on. I should just let Jenna say all this, but we focused on the idea of a food matrix. So do older adults, are they oriented to a functional food in a yogurt, in a cereal, in eggs, that sort of thing? The bioactive, that would be what sort of active component are they understanding or not understanding? Is it dietary fibre, probiotics? And then specific areas of health that they would or would consider consuming functional foods to address. And then we collected a whole bunch of information about the participant sample. So in our study, we had a sample of 200 older adults that were greater or equal to 60 years old who were living in the community and not using any meal-assisted services. They had to be able to complete the questionnaire. Judy did some focus groups as well and provide written consent. And this is our study questionnaire that included all the sections that I just mentioned. As well, we included these information sheets. And we worked hard on these information sheets to clarify what are functional foods to help the participants complete the questionnaire. So we kind of started at the questionnaire about, are you even aware of functional foods? And then we would tell them what functional foods are through an information sheet. Then we also made sure that they understood what functional food matrices are, and then what functional food bioactives are, so that we could collect information that was informative. So just a few slides about our results, because I really want to get onto the toolkit part. In our participant sample of 200, our average age was about 71, and we did have a pretty biased sample in terms of female, Caucasian, highly educated, and high income. So for sure we had a biased sample. And so this limits the generalizability of our results. This slide shows just some overall things that we found about functional foods from the outset. The first idea is that about a quarter of the participants were aware of what a functional food was. When we advertised for the study, we termed it a food survey study. We didn't say we're doing a functional food study. So it was just more like about what you eat. And so in the start, we said, are you aware of the term functional food? And only a quarter of them were. And then once we went through the information sheet, it was found that 93% of people were consuming functional foods. And then the majority were consuming them on a daily basis. I really like this graph, and so I'll just say the joke again, that this is a pie chart. It's really like my only joke. This is a pie chart, and dietitians like to present pie charts because then we can secretly be connected with pie. And this pie chart showed clearly that the timing of functional food consumption was most frequently at breakfast. I can tell you it's only my students that are laughing at my jokes the second time. And so this was an informative result because a key stakeholder group of our research was the food industry, and especially thinking about CFDR, who funded the research. Their members are food industry members, so we were doing the research in part to serve the needs of the food industry. And their needs are to know what are older adults wanting and thinking about for functional foods, so they can run back to their big, beautiful buildings and create functional foods that would be breakfast foods. This slide shows the results for the top most frequently consumed functional food products. And it shows that the most frequently consumed one is yogurt with probiotics. And this was closely followed by eggs with omega-3, bread with dietary fiber, and cereals with dietary fiber. So these are the types of functional foods and the percent of participants of those 200 participants. This slide shows some results about the functional food matrices, or forms. Matrices is just more sciencey sounding, but really they're the forms of the food. So here we have the different kind of forms or types of food, yogurt, bread, cereal, and here we have the percent of participants who currently consume functional foods in these forms. So it shows that yogurt or yogurt beverages are the most frequently consumed functional food, followed closely by bread, cereals, eggs, and beverages. Then we wanted to know what they would consider consuming. So maybe you're not consuming now, but looking to the future, if there were new functional foods that were developed, say if there was a pasta with enhanced level of resistant starch or something like that, or a bagel, then would you consume that? And bread, cheese, and pasta were the most frequently identified matrices that participants would consider consuming a functional food. Then we moved on from the matrices or the food forms to the bioactives, which is a key concept relating that identifies functional food. It has that bioactive. So Dr. Ken Stark's going to teach us about omega-3 fatty acids after me, and that definitely was a bioactive that participants were currently consuming in functional foods. So they're having omega-3 eggs or omega-3 yogurt or omega-3 milk. Dietary fiber was the most frequently consumed bioactive, followed by omega-3, then probiotics and antioxidants. And then in terms of considering, antioxidants came on top by far in terms of a bioactive that they would consider consuming in a functional food. This slide gives a few details about barriers to functional food consumption. Just first of all, looking at the text, before we get to the negative kind of stuff, health reasons were the most frequently reported rationales for consuming functional foods. So these ideas of, the idea of health as something that would promote consumption was something we found because health reasons were the most frequent. And then 86% reported consuming them to improve their health, and 80% reported they have more control over their health by consuming functional foods. Then looking at functional foods in terms of all these reasons to promote consumption, we found that taste, cost, risk of adverse effects, and awareness knowledge were factors that, yes, they would act as barriers to functional food consumption. So they can't taste bad, as Dr. Deiser would attest to. They can't cost too much. They can't cause any adverse effects, and I need to know about them. This awareness and knowledge result is really core to our development of the toolkit and our other dissemination strategies that we've worked on for the research. Now, the last kind of set of results I'll go over before the toolkit is health areas as they relate to functional foods. First, some overall ideas that participants were predominantly, we tried to use different words like majority, predominantly, so the majority were very interested in their overall health, and the majority indicated they had specific areas of health that they were concerned about. And when looking more at that, the top health areas that they currently address or would address through functional food consumption were osteoporosis, heart disease, arthritis, constipation, bowel health, or eye health. And then the next 3 slides are set up in a similar way, going through the 6 different bioactives that we studied in relation to health. So I'll just explain the first one here. This is the percent of participants. We had 200 participants. And then these are the different areas of health. And then we're going to go over each bioactive, antioxidants, dietary fiber, and then 2 more slides for the other 4, and see, okay, what health areas would you address through consuming antioxidants in functional foods? Which health areas would you address through consuming dietary fiber in functional foods? So antioxidants, cancer, eye health kind of came on top, followed closely by heart disease and immunity. Dietary fiber, it was constipation and bowel health was very high at top. Omega-3 fatty acids, it was heart disease. Probiotics, it was constipation and bowel health, but then don't know was quite high, which was interesting given that yogurt with probiotics was the most commonly consumed functional foods. But we didn't accuse them, you're being inconsistent. Just observe that. And then this slide is interesting because for both plant sterols and prebiotics, don't know was the most common area of health that they would address. And that's not really an area of health, they just didn't know. And so this was a key result as well to inform educational strategies. So I have presented a whole lot of results, so I tried to come up with some summary notes that included corny type titles to keep your attention. So dietary fiber is frequent, I was really proud of that title. And this was just kind of bringing together the observations that dietary fiber is the most frequently identified bioactive that they considered effective in improving their health, 87% of participants. Dietary fiber was the most frequently identified bioactive that they currently consume in functional foods, 80%. And this may be, therefore, a link between this bioactive they think is effective and what they actually consume. And it suggests the use of functional foods as a strategy for improving health. So this next one's really good. Yogurt is yearned. So yogurt with probiotics was the most commonly consumed food, functional food, and yogurt was the most frequently currently consumed functional food matrix. However, the probiotics had don't know as the second most commonly area of health they would address through consumption of probiotics in a functional food. So maybe the probiotics they don't really know, fiber they do know, so maybe yogurt with dietary fiber could be a really amazing functional food option. And then this one, I couldn't really come up with a title. I was thinking of PP or something because my daughter would laugh at that. But prebiotics and plant sterols, they both had a lot of commonalities that really made them the most opportunity for education. So they both had the least frequently identified bioactive considered effective at improving health. Both of them were the least frequently identified bioactive currently consumed in functional foods. And both of them had the most frequent response of don't know when they asked what area of health they would address through their consumption in functional foods. So that's a whole lot of information and a lot of results. What's really important in doing the process of research is not only getting published in a high-quality journal, but also considering the stakeholders of your research with respect to disseminating it out to the research end users. And that's what Agri-Food for Healthy Aging and the Research Institute for Aging is all about, is reaching back to the research end users in an efficient manner. And so when we started this research, we considered upfront our research stakeholders. And one of the key groups of our research stakeholders was registered dietitians. And so registered dietitians are the ones that we have worked on targeting as a major stakeholder group to give our results back to. We're hoping that the results will better inform their interaction with older adults in their navigation of daily food choices to manage their health. And we're hopeful that the concepts can also help them with other life stage groups as well. We also consider other key beneficiaries of our research as the food industry, like I mentioned, older adults themselves, which is part of the reason that we're here today to share our results, and the academic community. So when thinking about our research stakeholders and trying to get the information out to them, there's a whole bunch of strategies that you can employ, and a lot of them depend on the different stakeholder groups. So the Toolkit was one of many different research dissemination strategies that we've been working on from this group, from this research. So I want to talk a little bit about this Toolkit and how we came about doing it. So this overall Toolkit that we did, it's right here, I carry it around everywhere I go. Its overall purpose is to provide guidance, I don't really do that. Its overall purpose is to provide guidance and materials to assist registered dietitians in communicating with older adults about functional foods for healthy aging. And in this toolkit, we really went through quite a long process to develop and then engage stakeholders and revise it. So in the development phase, all those involved, which included Hillary and a few other graduate students, and Sarah actually was an undergraduate student at the time. We all actually revised our job titles to Toolkit creators, and we met every week to think about the toolkit, discuss the literature, identify gaps in the literature, and figure out what should we have in this toolkit. What should our main message be? We reviewed it, revised it, drank lots of coffee, ate functional food chocolate, and finally came up with a draft toolkit that we then presented to stakeholders. So we went out to events that stakeholders would be at, like the Royal Agriculture Winter Fair Health Professional Forum, like the CFDR Annual General Meeting. We extended out to specific colleagues, and then we produced a final version of the toolkit in fall 2012. Just to give you a bit of background or information about what is in the toolkit, and then share with you how we've moved on to disseminate and evaluate the toolkit. So the toolkit really has 3 main sections and an appendices section. The first section works to understand functional foods. So what are functional foods? I'll talk more about that. The second section talks about, well, okay, functional foods, I understand them now, but why are they relevant for aging? The third is a little bit of results from the research, and then the fourth are handouts and things that can be used in interaction with users of the toolkit. So going into section 1 a bit, what are functional foods? So we learned a little bit about it in this presentation, but this section gives various tables, descriptors, to really identify the different definitions across the world for functional foods and bring out the commonalities of those definitions. And interestingly, the commonalities really are what we learned in the research: the food form or the matrix, the bioactive, the health areas, and then in this section we also relate functional foods to natural health products or dietary supplements. That is, that bioactive, like the omega-3 in the eggs, what if the omega-3 was in a supplement? So we talk a little bit about that. Then we created this monster table that really goes over, if you encounter a functional food in the grocery store, not a dark alley, what will you see on the label of the functional food? What sort of guidance is there on that functional food to help you as a potential purchaser of that functional food understand it? So we went through every single possible thing that would be on that functional food product that was kind of a regulated and communication type thing. So that includes like the list of ingredients, the nutrition facts table, and tons of different claims, whether it be a nutrient content claim, like it's fat-free, an additional food-related claim, it's organic, or a health claim, disease risk reduction, therapeutic, function, general health claim. So that table took quite a long time, and then we thought, this is a great table and we understand it, but we need to exemplify it. So we included examples of 5 different products of cereal, juice, margarine, milk, and yogurt, and we took pictures of them, not just from the front view, but from the top, the front, the back, the side 1, side 2, and we pulled out each of the sources of functional food guidance. You can see that in the balloons. We identified what it is, and then we included these dietetic practice points that would really pull out what was meaningful about that. So we were getting pretty tired by then, but we pushed on and included a section about functional foods in the Canadian marketplace. There's a great report that was published by an author whose last name is Cinnamon, which is a really cool name. And so we used information from that report to kind of give some information about where functional foods are at in Canada. Then we included the second section. It really focused on healthy aging and the challenges that we need to face as we age, and we identified many different ones, but we focused on cancer, cardiovascular disease, and type 2 diabetes as core examples, and we talked about them and what they are. And then we looked at the impact on healthcare expenditure, and we specifically identified how functional foods might be able to help that. So there's actually a key study that came out of University of Manitoba that did an economic analysis of plant sterols and functional foods and how it would impact healthcare expenditures related to heart disease. So we gave some information about that study as a key example of how it is that really consuming functional food could actually not only improve our health, but improve the economy with respect to healthcare expenditure. Then we included some research that specifically targeted registered dietitians in considering functional foods in their practice, what they thought about functional foods, the registered dietitians, and what their kind of likelihood of using functional foods would be. Then we had a section that described the research that we just talked about today in terms of what it is, what the rationale, what we did, and what we found. And then we had appendices that were intended to kind of be in there, and you can just photocopy them and hand them out maybe to the people that you're interacting with. So first of all, we had the information sheets from the questionnaire that went over the definition, the food forms, the bioactives, the health claims. And then we had these bioactive resource sheets that we're super proud of. They're each one page, and they focus on each of the bioactives. And I have an example here where it goes over, oh no I don't, where, so basically they go over what they are and what they do, some results from the research, and then 3 articles to go for further information. And whenever possible, we made those articles Canadian citations. So in terms of launching the toolkit, we were really excited to launch it. And we felt that in terms of doing this, we looked at a whole bunch of different approaches. So first we did a webinar in January, and it was hosted by CFDR, and 400 people logged on. So I was just praying that there wasn't going to be a fire alarm that day in our building, because there are periodic test fire alarms, and there wasn't, so that went over well. And then we focused on disseminating a PDF of the toolkit, so basically a file that anyone can download. And that file is available on the Agri-Food for Healthy Aging website, so it's intended to be available really to anybody. Even though it was primarily developed for dietitians, it is in a form that anyone can use it. So it's meant to be shared. And then we also put it on websites that are specific for dietitians, like CFDR, Dietitians of Canada, and they have some practice-based evidence and nutrition type resources. As well, Hillary's been promoting it through different media like e-blasts and social media outlets. So in terms of evaluating the toolkit, we've been doing this through a couple of ways. First, we've been tracking how many people are downloading it. So we have 100 to date. I've only done 50 myself. And we also have, I'm just kidding, we also have an evaluation survey in the toolkit where you download the toolkit or look at the toolkit, and the very first page is a quick survey that you can link on, and it's very quick, and it has just a few questions to ask about your use of the toolkit and how you found it. So just some take-home points: that functional foods are an exciting strategy to promote healthy aging, as older adults are incorporating them into their diets, and they're motivated to address multiple health concerns through functional food consumption. There are key functional food matrices and bioactive ingredients that are preferred among older adults, and this can be valuable to stakeholders. And this Functional Foods for Healthy Aging Toolkit can be used as a knowledge transfer tool to aid registered dietitians in their interactions with older adults about functional foods. So I want to thank, first of all, Canadian Institutes for Health Research. The Institute for Nutrition, Metabolism and Diabetes actually funded this event that we're having today. The Canadian Foundation for Dietetic Research funded the research project, as well MAFRA, Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. They have a branch that's committed to knowledge translation, and they contributed support to the toolkit. As well, they've contributed support to Agri-Food for Healthy Aging. Judy Shishka is my co-investigator on the grant, and she worked on some focus groups. And then the graduate students, Megan, this was her MSc project. I should actually change that to MSc, not current student, because after, let's see, 3 interviews, she got a job at Kellogg's, and she's starting next week. And that's really exciting. Laura, she actually is in med school. Hillary, we know how successful she is right there. And Jenna is here, and she also became a dietitian as well as her master's, now working in a diabetes outpatient clinic in West Elgin. And so at the time, undergraduate students Sarah Dainty, who is now doing her MSc, Brittany Kay, who's actually starting her MSc in the fall, and Caitlin, who is in naturopathic college, and then the research participants themselves. And thank you to all of you for sometimes laughing at my jokes, but paying attention the whole time. Thank you.